Right, I'm sorry, it's going to go kind of crazy Inception thing for a moment. But then hopefully...
Ah, lovely.
I will start with a bunch of skulls from Rothwell Ossuary. So...
Oh, really?
Yeah, you see...
How did you get in there?
It's open. It's open almost constantly. I think it's the 4th Sunday of the month between 2 and 4, if they have a custodian available.
Did you say Roswell?
Rothwell.
Ah, okay. Because I went to Roswell and there wasn't an ossuary. I was very disappointed.
That would be so wonderful.
Yeah. There was like one tiny carved skull and that was it for me. I was just like, where are the bones? I know. No aliens, no, mystic symbols.
But I wanted to share this because not many people realise we used to have ossuaries all over the country. So you'd bury your relatives in the graveyard, but the graveyard would get full and population was growing, farming was getting better and could sustain more people. So after a while, you dig them up. You know whose bones they are most of the time, and you bundle all the big bones into the basement of the chapel and put someone else in. Very much like Hamlet meeting Yorick. It used to be a regular practice. And if you see on some of these skulls, I don't know if you can see my mouse.
Little numbers.
But this one... Yeah, so 377. Yeah, it's not seen as ethical to just write numbers on their foreheads now, but but if I can refer to 377, you can see he's smooth, and he's smooth because he's been polished.
Used to touch him.
People used to pick him up and give him a stroke, presumably for decades, to make him that polished.
Wow.
Which probably means they knew who he was, and they were going every weekend to visit Grandad straight after church. Give him a stroke. I don't know why I'm miming this. You can't see me.
I can see you.
Oh, no. Okay, right. But the trouble I find when you get a mass of skulls like this is they all sort of just look like Halloween skulls. They look the same. So I'm going to skip from this to starting to help them look more individual. So we're going to meet... most of these guys and gals again, but for the first drawing exercise I'm just going to switch to that, and on the other side have the 3Ds available. So feel free to start drawing any of these chaps or ladies on the left, but I just want to highlight just how different they are. So up on the top left is a person of European heritage, and male, probably identified as male because people weren't as open-minded back in, yes, he's 200 years old or so. And if you look at the shape of his eyes and the shape of the hole for the nose, they're the two big indicators for where someone came from and how they look. So he's a European male. And you can see how different he looks, both in the shape of the head here, the shape of the nose, and even in how the teeth are presented to this. This is another male, but he's of African heritage, probably. Sorry, I know, Lisa, you know them all by nickname. So that's Bert, that's Nick.
I'm not as familiar with your skull collection as you might presume.
Oh, that's fair. That's fair.
Only Bob and Fred.
Yes. So, and here on the bottom is Fred. So Fred was my first encounter with a skull, and he's Indian subcontinent, probably, but certainly Asian. And so you can see, if you look particularly, say, at his nose, it's this kind of teardrop shape. Because a European nose tends to be longer and narrower across the base.
Oh,
and
interesting.
If we look over at Bob, it's more of a kind of inverted heart because they have a much more pronounced nasal spine. So Bob's African female in comparison to African male, though they're probably from very different areas of Africa. This is a very hand wavy because people are so individual. It's always hard to be precise about where they're from.
Is it true that the sort of Asian skulls have a slightly more gracile jawbone, for example, which can make it difficult to identify gender?
Yes. So if I draw you over to here, so that was Bob. Let's turn Bob off and turn Fred on. So he's our Indian chap. And if we just look around his skull, you can see it's not, it is quite square, but it is, his whole face is quite narrow and lightly boned. They call it gracile, but yes. And if we look underneath his jawbone, he's got quite a narrow palate. He's got quite a narrow jaw.
Yeah.
And even though things like the Rasmus are quite broad, it's still.
Which are the Rasmus?
Oh, so the Rasmus is the width of the jawbone as it comes up.
Okay.
And you can also look at the angle. So the closer this angle is to 90 degrees, the more masculine it's seen as. And I know this means nothing when you look at one skull, which is why I ended up with more than one. So if I turn Fred off and turn Bob on, just to be nice and confusing, her angle of jaw is very similar.
Yes, I see that.
Pointing out, I know Bob's a bloke's name, but she came with the name. So she's definitely got a feminine jaw, but by comparison, Fred's is quite similar too. Now, if we look at this jaw, is a little bit more squared.
And who's this we're looking at?
I will tell you in a second, but these flares here are a very masculine trait. The squareness of this chin, rather than being particularly pointed, being kind of broad, is also a very masculine trait. This is me. This is my skull from the CT scan. And if ever someone just found my jawbone, I'd have to say, male.
I would look at that jawbone and just go, look at those flanges. Yeah. My God.
Male as anything. The second thing to look at is the mastoid process. So this thing here, again, is bigger and broader in males. And I have a very male mastoid process. Again, if we compare him to Fred's is much more delicate than mine, even though he's male. Bob's is virtually non-existent there.
Oh, yes. And Bob's the Asian female, is that right?
Bob's an African female.
Okay.
Whereas if we get Nick up, he's the African male, and he's got one to rival me. If I put mine up and go away, mine's bigger. And
it's not a competition.
Yes, and a squarer jaw. My goodness, I'm so male. The other male I have is, do I have your jawbone? No, I don't. So this is an archaeological skull, and there's his mastoid process. And though he doesn't have a jawbone to speak of, you can see also these eyebrow ridges, which are a very masculine trait. So he is at least very definitely male. And if we switch him off, we can get Nick back. Much less of an eyebrow ridge here. But again, it's not as much as an African trait. I fortunately do not have a strong eyebrow ridge. I am feminine. Okay.
In that respect, anyway. So I believe when people are looking at skulls, there's a kind of sliding scale from probable male to probable female.
Yes, which definitely has a center point of question mark.
Yeah.
And there are different ways of doing it, but you can grade skulls between 5 and 9 different points, I think.
Okay.
And give each of them a possible male, possible female, or middling. And from that, you sort of take an average. So Fred would be just about male if you also account for him being Asian in the jawbone. One of the things is to get your thumb into the eye socket there and measure how sharp it is. That's something I would have loved doing on this meet-up in person. But it's a little bit more difficult like this.
So what does the sharpness of the eye socket indicate? So
a sharper inside angle of the eye socket is a feminine trait. It's one of the few things where a sharper thing is a female trait. The other is a sharper chin. So the more pointed a chin here is a more feminine. The more broad, rounded, or square is masculine. Let's see if Bob unfortunately doesn't have the most feminine of chins either. But one of the fun things, I'm sorry if you weren't here for a skull lesson, you're getting one. So one of the things that tells us Bob's from Africa is the shape of the skull from the top. These two prominences, it's called a coffin shape. I don't really understand why, but it's so much kind of broader in the virtual shoulder here. And if we look at Nick, he isn't, which totally fooled me. I didn't think he was African, but I've since had a expert opinion, and that was ruled more by looking at the shape of his eyes and the shape of his nose. But his head is not showing that coffin shape so much, but it does flare out here a little. Compare him to lost bird. Bob. Let's compare him to me. So I've got a very European head. It's very rounded already. It's slightly longer along the axis. Many people are. We're never quite symmetric. And I know that whenever I put a bike helmet on, I get a big red mark there and a pain there.
Well, interestingly, when I cast my head, and I shaved my head first in order to do it because I was using plaster, I was amazed to find it was completely flat at the back. And I believe I've since learned it's called brachycephalic. And I did wonder what my mother had done to me as a child, because I had suspicions about having my head bound. But then I went to look at her head; it was the same, and so is my brother's. It's kind of Asian skull.
Yeah,
and it looks like I've been slapped to the back of the head with a big board.
So if I go back to Bob's head, I know she's not Asian, she's African, but she's got a bit of this of being able to have a flat area there, which means she can just lie back. In fact, you can take the skull and you can rest it on the back of her head.
And it won't roll off the table.
Precisely. Whereas Michael, who is European, is basically football. There's no way of keeping on our table without wedges or
I do have a theory about how football came to be invented, and it's based on the incredible roundness of the European skull.
Yes. And so we go over and tell the Incas that we're superior to them, and they go, no, but you'll make a very good football.
Yeah. Well, how are we doing on the sketching? We must have a couple of minutes so far.
Yeah, if I stop sharing, you have to stop. So I will wait for feedback from you, Lisa, as to when I should stop sharing and come and look in again.
Well, let's stop now and have a little looky.
Okay.
And then I can also have a little talk about materials and things. Apologies, my overhead cam is a really, really bad one. And this is probably very fuzzy. But so I don't know what other people have been using, but I've started off with a very soft pencil. It's just a B. And because of the way Sue has photographed the skulls really beautifully, like they're portraits, you tend to have the light coming from one side and sort of shadow on the other. And in order to sort of bring out the lightness of this side, I've basically gone over the background quite hard to make it stand out. Because if you're drawing tonally, when you see an object, the line that you're seeing is an illusion. It's not an actual line. It's a surface that's created by one side being darker or lighter than the other. Now, the tricky thing is on the other side, which I think Oh, yeah, there we go. The other side is also dark. So you either have to make your background a lot darker or actually keep this side light, which is a technique, obviously, a lot of painters used to use, particularly the Spanish chiaroscuro effect, they'd call it. And there's a wonderful artist called Zurbaran who did a lot of paintings of St. Francis, and he's always holding a skull. And the lighting on those is fantastic, where you get the sort of highlights and the shadows. So all I've been doing with my soft pencil really is picking out the darkest areas, leaving the lightest areas, and sketching in the sort of midtones. So I'm actually using a sort of tan-colored, sand-colored paper here. Now, I don't know what materials you guys have brought with you, but I'm assuming pencils and pens. But if you happen to have something like a white pencil, this is quite handy if you're working mid-tonally, because you can use that to sort of or you can break it immediately. The live TV. Yeah, you can use that to just pick out highlights and accentuate them a little bit, so it continues to give you that sort of three-dimensional feel. And you can leave your midtones, but it gives you this sort of extra tonality, and particularly for areas where you might just have a little thin bit of light where it's being caught by your lighting. So do you want to do a show and tell yet?
Anyone want to come in?
No.
No, I'm just looking in at the chat and no one's jumping up and down trying to come in. Though I have had someone ask what age are the skulls. And of course they have two ages. So there's how old they were when they died and how long they've been dead.
Of course.
Yes. So starting with these, so you can see pretty much all of them have a slice across the top because they're anatomy specimens. But they have been dead and anatomy specimens for over 100 years. And to get to be an anatomy specimen, they usually pick people, nice, healthy people. I'm sorry, not healthy, they're dead. Nice, healthy people who usually die of something that doesn't affect the bone. So it will be a terrible fever, a terrible infection that killed them quite quickly, so that their bones are still as if in life. And they tend to be dead in their 20s or 30s. But I can talk more about how you find an age of skull and how old some skulls are, because we're going to go to much older ones now that have been sat in the ground for much longer.
Okay, cool.
So if there's nothing else on the chat, I will go back to sharing my screen. Sorry to make it go terrible for a second.
Well, just before you start with that,
yes,
one of the other materials I wanted to work with was biro. And I know everyone will have a biro. And what's both nice and frustrating about biro, obviously, is you can't rub it out. And the good thing about that is you then don't waste a lot of your precious drawing time going back and erasing things. And you can also build it up quite densely. So I don't know if any of our participants would like to grab a biro and just have a go. And hopefully, does that show up? Yes, can you see that?
I'm in sharing mode, so I can't see you.
Oh, okay. It's okay. I think I can see it on there. So I keep trying different lighting.
Let me just check. I'm sorry, I'm inceptioning you all. I can see something, yes.
Okay, yeah. So it might be quite interesting to start, have a little play with the biro and not worry about your mistakes. Just keep going and building it up and building it up. And what is good about biro is you can squiggle with it and build up quite nice textures. So shall we ever go with that?
Okay.
And are we going to have a look at a different skull?
We are. I'm going to give you a quick tour of a couple of others, and then pause on a nice, pretty one. So who have got? Oh, this was just to point out, you tend to notice differences in skulls, not when they're sat together is not bad. That's a terrible way to try and notice differences. But funnily enough, just putting them in the same box and suddenly so many differences jump out.
So this is the same box?
It's the same, but it's actually the back of a camera, an old bellows camera.
Fantastic. And you can immediately see the difference in sizes, which actually I wouldn't have noticed from the previous one.
Yeah. Well, it's really hard until you're holding them in your hands, but it shows, this is Michael. This is a big, lumpy European male. Michael, I love you dearly, but he is quite a brute.
He can barely fit in there.
Yes. And again, if you look at them from the side, just the difference in the shape of the face, of resting between the mastoid process and somewhere on the teeth, just shows these different shapes of head.
So that one bottom left is...
That's Bob with that big coffiny head.
Ah, and look at those teeth.
Mm.
They seem to protrude a lot more than the one above it.
Yes, so that one I think is Nick, who has that more rounded head and much less protruding teeth. And that's Fred.
Right.
It's so bizarre that I know them all by name. Anyway, so we're going to skip on from the anatomy ones to archaeology ones. And this was when I was first learning my trade, God help me. So the lighting's awful, the angle's awful, the camera length. So as most of you will have noticed, if you have a wide angle lens like on your laptop and you're doing a Zoom call, you feel quite, it's not the most flattering picture. Basically, a wide angle lens is a very ugly way of showing people. And what you would normally do for a good portrait would be much more a zoom lens. And so I didn't know this at this time. So this is a chap. But he's Anglo-Saxon, and I brought him on because that's the back of his head.
Oh.
And that diamond shape injury is probably what killed him. That sort of flange shows that it happened in life because basically something was pushed in and pulled out while there was still skin here. So it wasn't something that happened in the grave.
Yes. And
that diamond shaped figure is typical of Viking warhammers.
Oh, really?
So this poor Anglo-Saxon, and I just go back, I swear he looks a little bit shocked in the eyebrows.
Yes.
But it looks like someone just ran up behind him, smacked him in the back of the head with a warhammer and ran away.
And look at the cracks.
So the fractures basically just radiate out, but then as soon as they hit a suture, that's the weak point. And so it follows all the way up that suture. This one cracks down into this suture.
That's incredible.
But yes, what little we know about him was probably he did meet a Viking, but not for very long. Whereas this is, so I will get to the ones that I'll pause to draw on.
That's lovely.
He's got such a lumpy head. He's so angular.
And what do we know about him?
So he's from the 10th to the 12th century. And aside from a lumpy head and not bad teeth, he's got this kind of etching into the skull. That's from being buried in the ground for a long time. So these are all from archaeological digs.
Yes.
But yes, where he was buried, it was a churchyard with 600 other people. And one of the notable things is they had what are called eavesdrop or eavesdrip burials, which I'll tell you about, but I'm just going to skip to the one you can actually sit and draw, which is this chap with his broken zygomatic arches.
Wow.
A nice angle. But look at those flares here.
That's incredible.
Male.
Yeah.
So male. And I'm going to leave him up so that you can draw him, but you can see he's got this long, narrow nose and these huge flared kind of Robert Redford arches. But I'll let you get drawing and stop flicking around.
Yes, but feel free to tell us more about.
Yes. So, yes, Eve's drip burials. Basically, a lot of infants would die within the first days, weeks, or sometimes years of birth. And if they weren't baptized officially, they weren't allowed in many of the churchyards. And this felt very bad because not being baptized implied you couldn't go to heaven. You'd immediately go to hell. And parents obviously got quite angsty about this and wanted to do something for their children.
Yeah.
And what became each churchyard is different, and it's hard to know if it was with an official blind eye turned or what, but basically many churchyards had premature and very young infants buried just under the eaves of the church.
Oh.
With the thought that rain would fall from the sky, fall onto the church roof and become semi-blessed, semi-holy, and then drip onto the bodies of the children, and therefore give them some sort of baptism or blessing or such. And certainly sometimes this happened, it's sort of in the dead of night, people would sneak in and bury their children. In other places, it looks like the priest may have turned a blind eye, let the gravedigger do it, maybe even sometimes doing official blessings. But it was one of those shady practices that no one talked about, so it's not well documented. But it's amazing how many times the archaeologists are digging up a graveyard and find some of these things.
In the wrong place.
In places they shouldn't be, but most of the time there are no graves for young children at all.
Because of the reasons that you've said, yes, about them not being baptized.
Even when they're baptized, even children up to about the age of 8 or 10 are very underrepresented in churchyards. People often, and it's a strange practice to us now, people kept them at home. They'd bury them under the floor, behind the chimney, in the walls. Why they weren't being put in graveyards is not clear. I don't know whether they didn't.
Was there a cost involved? Perhaps, yeah.
It's really unclear. No one seems to know. But I'm talking about England here primarily.
Yes.
But yes, if you try to study, children from medieval times or anything like that, you'll struggle because the bodies just aren't there, and we don't know what they did with them.
Oh, they must be out there somewhere.
No, go for it.
Oh, I was just going to say, as I'm using the biro here, one of the nice things about biro is you can alter the pressure on it quite a lot. You'd think you would only get one type of line from a biro, but unlike sort of ink pens, you can press harder to get a darker mark, and you can go very lightly, which gives you a sort of grayish line. And because this skull has such an amazing texture to it, I'm actually almost squiggling all over it just to build up that sort of crumbly looking texture in the bone, at the same time as sort of describing the shape of it. And this is quite a nice it's quite a nice therapeutic way to work, actually, because you're not worrying too much about your details to begin with, but actually just building up those textures. And again, because I can't help myself, because you got that lovely lighting coming from the top here, I'm putting in much darker background here to make the light areas stand out. So you don't get so much of a hard line as a sort of a feel of sort of shading. And biro is surprisingly good for shading. You should be doing some drawing, Sue.
I was at a writing workshop yesterday, which I drew like 5 or 6 pictures with my biro. It's like, it's okay. I realise I miss drawing.
Yeah. Well,
it's really nice you're noting the texture though, because it's one of the reasons I love photographing skulls that the archaeologists are bringing out, because so much of the texture comes out from the bone, and it tells kind of the second life story. So there's what happened to the person in life and how their skull was formed, and then from the other side, what happened to where they were. Yeah. So if they're in chalk or so, they tend to be better preserved, and if they're in peat, they often get a much darker tone to the bone, and it polishes because peat moves around. Oh. So again, it just tends to come, and they come out like polished pebbles. They're beautiful.
I did not know that. The only bodies, obviously, when you think of peat bodies, you tend to think of the complete ones with their skins on.
Mm. Yeah.
And don't the bones actually become rubbery in peat? Is there something to do with the acidity of it or something?
I think you're right, because it'll take out the calcium and leave the collagen. And collagen would normally break down and make bones become quite brittle. But peat preserves skin, it preserves collagen, it preserves all sorts of strange things for us.
But they end up becoming like sort of bendy toys.
Yeah. Oh, that's a lovely image.
I'm so sorry.
I'm just wondering, well, maybe in the next break I'll have a look for one of the peat skulls, just to show you the difference in colour.
Oh, I'd love to see that, yeah.
Yeah, I was trying to get a nice variety of skulls. It's and in the end I settled for most of the ones are on one of my websites, osteophoto.co.uk.
Oh, yes.
All of these views, all of these pictures that we're pausing at are on that website. So if you do feel like expanding your drawing or spending more time with it, dig around for a bit, you'll find it there somewhere.
Fantastic. What I find quite interesting is that you're photographing the skulls like portraits. And that this is what I attempt to do when I'm drawing them. I'm drawing them like portraits. These are portraits of the people as they are now.
Yes.
And you can, I mean, I love facial reconstructions, but I have to say I don't feel that they're necessary for you to become familiar with the features of a deceased, you know?
Yes. I mean, I if I go back to these chaps on the PowerPoint,
yes,
just I love that I've got beyond every skull looks the same and every skull looks like a Halloween skull. I now can't stand Halloween skulls because they're exaggerated and wrong, and it's just so terrible.
Well, people quite often give me skull gifts because they know I like them, and I'm just like, but it's not anatomically accurate.
Yes. It's someone did hand me a skull, and I looked at it and went, okay, that's actually really good. That's a European female. And they just looked at me like, what? No, this has been modelled on a real person. This is a copy of a real skull. It's not just made up.
Well, I have to say I have a beautiful skull tidy that was a gift when I left work. And that was one of the things I was impressed with. You could see by, the shapes of the teeth, and obviously it was just the upper jaw. There was no mandible. But you could see that it had, in fact, been modelled on a real skull, and was therefore an actual person.
And that's something that's
probably
so
male.
Important. Yeah, it's so important to remember, because these are all people. I mean, they're the remains of people now, and what we can tell about what their life was like is very limited. But it's still as much as a life story as we can give them.
Well, written in bone, yes.
Yes. And though archaeologists don't like giving them nicknames, I don't know of a museum specimen that doesn't have a nickname unofficially, because people want to bond with them. People want
Yes.
to be
Well,
able
they
to talk
do.
about them.
Bond with them. You can't help yourself because they're human and you're human. You have that connection.
Mm.
I was interested when I posted some of those drawings from the Natural History Museum that you recognize. For example, you recognize Cheddar Man.
Yes.
He's like, "Is that Cheddar Man?" Like, oh, yes, well done. Not only that, but you're related to him.
Oh yes, so I did one of these flaky DNA thingies, and I have 128 SNPs, so single nucleotide proteins, so a chain of 128 letters of my genetic code, exactly shared with Cheddar Man.
Amazing.
I mean, it doesn't matter if he had children. He is everyone's ancestor. It's just so far back. It is a mathematical certainty. However, there's this little fragment that's me and him.
Yeah. It's heartwarming, isn't it?
It is.
Well, apparently anyone who had ancestors living in England at the time of Elizabeth I is related. I'm not sure how true that is, but
that's probably about right. I worked out when I was looking at my ancestry tree for my mum, and she was very disappointed to be related to royalty, but not to have traced it to Robin Hood. And it's like, Robin Hood's less well documented. But I looked, and to go that far back, I believe you need, it's something like 5 billion grandparents at a time wherein only 1 million people were living in the country. So they are all your great-great-grandfather and great-great-grandmother several times over by that point.
Yes.
How do you think people are doing on drawing? Shall I stop sharing, or do you want a couple more minutes?
I don't know. People are being very coy.
If I look over at the chat, I'm sorry, you're all going to get a terrible screen for a second. Wah!
I love that. British Museum has mirrors that do that.
Right, got a request for a couple more minutes. So
okay. Well, it's because this is such a great skull, isn't it? I mean, it's just so powerful.
Well, people continuing to draw, there he is, but I can give you a preview of what's coming. So there's a medieval chap here. Oh, he's highlighted because of
metopic suture. I mean, I'm not an expert on skulls like you, but I recognize that.
I have a fondness because I'm the only living person I know with it, because I've seen it on my CT scan. But it means I have one more bone than normal adult humans, because this is meant to fuse into one bone after you're about 20 years old. And in some people, for some reason, probably genetic, it just doesn't.
Yeah.
If I go back to the 3D thing, if I go to Michael, so he's quite an old gentleman. Well, he's 40s, 50s, so old for how old he is. It's unclear. He's something before Victorian, but he could be Georgian, he could be medieval. Unfortunately, there's no history written from him, because he turned up in a flea market. So
you're going to say he turned up in a car park.
No, that's only kings.
Only kings.
But as you get older, so you're born with many sutures holding your skull together. When you're a child, a lot of it's just cartilage, and it's very loosely held together so that you can be born. And as you get older, these different sutures fuse or obfuscate or close up, and that starts to tell you how old a skull is. So some are absolutely smooth and have no lines left whatsoever, and that tends to be very old, 80s, 90s. Michael here has lost this suture line, which tends to put him at 40s, 50s, and he's starting to lose the suture lines along the back from the occipital bone here. Don't worry about this. This is damage from probably when they dug him up or found him or whatever. And this suture here has started to go, though he's still cracked along there.
Yeah.
So you can see the suture line is halfway there and would normally come all the way down here, but it's just gone. And that's just, it's called obliterated, and it helps you date a skull, because each of these suture lines, as we saw from Mr. Viking Warhammer, is a weak point. And the more frilly they are, in a kind of fractal way, tends to say they're stronger, but it's also more complex. And so things sometimes go wrong. So sometimes you find extra bones in the back here, and it tends to mean the back of the skull becomes a funny shape.
There's a word for those extra bones, isn't there?
There's many. So there's ossicles as a general term.
Right, okay. I think that's the one I was thinking of.
Yeah, but if
they're
it's
like little islands floating in your skull.
Yes, but if it's here, it's called an Inca bone, because it's a very common trait in Middle and South America.
Wow.
I found one in a museum. Oh, I'd best not go searching for pictures. And they'd called it a triquetrum bone, which two experts have never heard of, but it's the kind of, if you got a triangle and made out of kind of three petals like the Celtics did, that's a triquetrum. And what it was describing was the suture comes down here as normal, but then makes a second bone here and a third bone there. So rather than a triangle here like an Inca bone, it makes these kind of two petals on the sides.
Oh, well, that sounds lovely. I'll have to keep an eye out.
Yeah, I've only seen one, and it wasn't the one I was looking for, but suddenly I was looking for them. But it just shows every time you look at skulls, there's something new to find.
Yeah.
Which is such fun. Right, I'm going to just peek over at the chat again. Oh, I see a long message from Huda. I will come back to that in a second. I've just noticed my camera was still off. But do people need to keep drawing, or do you want to move to a new chat?
Shall we wrap this one up? Because as you say, we can always come back to these on your website if we desire.
Okay.
And let's see what else you've got.
So chat about him. Oh, sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to say, see if anyone wants to have a little share.
Nothing on the chat so far.
Well, I hope everyone's enjoying themselves despite being very...
Yes, I hope I'm not boring you terribly with all the skull talk.
No, that's what we're here for, isn't it?
I thought to myself, how long can I talk about a skull? Surely only 5 or 10 minutes. It turns out to be more.
Yes, you have no problem with that. But what we could do is we could move on to another skull, and I could move on to another technique as well if people are interested.
Okay. Well, one nice one which I thought might make if I go straight to the picture, but we were talking about ossicles.
Yes.
And this lady, I'm afraid this is the only lady, I will explain why after a while, but she has the most beautiful, intricate fractal lines. And there's an ossicle where you can see it's a whole island, and another, and another, and another, and another, and another, and there's a couple in there. She must have like 250 bones. She must have 50 bones more than the rest of us.
But they are beautiful, aren't they? They're like lace work.
So I thought I might give you that just for 5 minutes, just because it's not a very flattering skull angle, but the one thing that no one in her life would ever have appreciated, and I wish more people could see, was just how beautiful her suture lines are.
Yeah.
She's a very funny lady, actually. Well, no, that's a terrible term. She's a lovely, lovely lady. She's small. she's old, so you can see she's lost the metopic suture here. She's started to heal the suture line here. So she was a full adult, probably in her 30s, possibly 40s. She was buried with a child, which is presumably hers, but she's tiny. She was about 4.5 foot, and she has this beautiful face, almost like a Disney princess. Her eyes and nose are normal size. It's just her head is very, very small. And
wow.
the size of the dome of the head is out of proportion for an adult. She looks like a child. She probably looked like a almost a doll or a Disney princess in life.
And where was she found?
So, these are all from Cambridge area, because I wangled my way into the archaeology department to document some of the things they were working on for a project called After the Plague. So she's from, where are you, my darling? She's very early, so she's 5th to 7th century, but was buried in chalk south of Cambridge, so her bones have survived. So very often male bones typically are heavier, stronger, more robust than female bones. I'm sorry, I hate the sexism of it. It's testosterone. And it means if it's an erody type of soil, especially a normal sort of soil, so not your fenland peat and not your chalk, then the bones dissolve and females go first. So many archaeology digs have a sex imbalance because thicker bones just last longer.
Yeah.
But because she was there in chalk, not only did she as a female survive, but she as a female of this really gracile form survived.
Well, presumably her child survived, if they found...
Well, I don't have a note of how old the child was. It might have been a childbirth death for both of them. It wasn't in situ, so it was born, because often in graveyards they do find children basically in the birth canal, and it tends to mean death in childbirth. Sometimes it's even earlier stage ones, and unfortunately they look like fish, because they're not very human shaped in the early days, and the bones are not fused how you expect them to be, because they don't need to be yet. And they have a tendency to stick to archaeologists' boots, so you have to be extremely careful walking around muddy sites. Just occasionally hear these terrible tales of someone walking into the porter cabin for their lunch and their boot goes crunch rather than splodge.
Oh,
and it's like, oh, what did I step in?
Oh, God.
And
Who
that
did
tends to be
in?
yes, and that tends to be, oh right, we haven't found the skeleton yet, but we're just at the right area, and the child is sitting that bit higher than the pelvis.
And there is a phenomenon of giving birth in death, isn't there? Where if a woman dies before they've actually given birth while they're pregnant, then the fetus can be expelled.
Yes, so sometimes you see very young children in the birth canal, and it's like this is like a 20-weeker. There's no way this should be anywhere near the birth canal now.
Yeah.
And again, it just tells you a little bit of the tale of what happened to that person in their life. And it's just, in some ways, heartbreaking, but is a great way to remember that it comes to all of us.
I must say, this is such a lovely skull. I'm actually enjoying this angle because it's kind of challenging to look at it from that angle, to be able to see, up through the mandible. And I was going to draw those beautiful
ossicles.
Yes, but actually it's just the shape, and as I say, this unusual angle is quite fascinating. So quite often when people want to draw skulls, they want to draw the face.
Yeah. Because
it's the same with just seeing people in real life. That's what you look at, is the face. But it's actually quite interesting to look at look at them from
a different way.
Yeah. So I will just quickly try and get some of those sutures in, though, because
they are quite pretty.
That's why we're here. I love the way this one just here that describes that sort of plate on the side. I've forgotten. Is it the temporal bone?
Yes. So you're looking there. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. That sort of plate. It's like a continent.
That's I'm just going to go techie again. So there's two good ways of attaching bones. So these here are like two big flat planks that you've stuck together, and then you want to make it stick. So you make more and more jigsaw lugs to stick them together. Whereas what happens on the temporal bone is that's kind of a wedge shape. So it's thin and gets thicker, and the bone on the other side is thin and gets thicker, and they overlap the thin and thick thing so that the average bone thickness is about the same. But you have a strong joint, but it's a very different joint type, and it means you can grow in a different plane. So you can grow along that length a lot easier, because they just slide apart, and you just add bone to the top and slide them apart, and you make a bigger joint. Yeah,
that actually makes sense. You know, when I think about them like tectonic plates sort of moving together apart, that's what they remind me of. They're sort of more geographical. Although the other sutures, actually quite often they do sort of remind me of, meandering rivers. It's like looking at what's that one that cuts through Utah? There's a particularly huge one in America, and it just, the meander, when you look at it almost from space. I actually can't quite see all of these those sutures.
No, I tried zooming in a little, and you see just how ridiculous intricate it is. And then there's this surface detail which has been slightly etched from the chalk and the plants in the soil, but we'll do another of those.
Do you think there's sort of plant root? It looks slightly rooty.
Well, if we look at where are you? This chap, that is a plant root. He's coming up. And he's from a similar place. But yes, it was looking at this kind of thing, and then your drawings of skulls and skeletons on antique maps of the area they lived in.
Well, yes.
That inspired me to do some drawing and do skulls in the shapes of globes and different projections.
Yeah. Sorry, well, the relationship between the pattern and the texture of skulls and the maps just it's too good not to use. The texture of a map, if you draw a skull over the top of it, gives it a really skull-like, particularly, as you say, the archaeological ones, a wonderful scully texture with the roads and the lines. It's almost as if when you look at the inside of a skull, so where the inside of the cranium is formed over the shapes of the actual blood vessels of your brain.
Yes.
And they look like the roots of trees or maps. I
could show some views of that if people wanted. I'd have to just dig in my archives a bit. But I'd certainly have some photos of inside of skulls from the anatomy.
Maybe not in this thing, because you've got so many other skulls I want to see, and we've only got about another half hour or so.
Oh, right, yes.
I know. Time is flying away from us with our skull enjoyment. So,
okay, but for a preview for later, I think it was my choice for the last one with that beautiful plant there. And you can see, again, it's a strange angle to get a good view of it. But that is not just so. All this etching and bleaching is a tree root that thought it had done brilliantly, because it's got this great source of minerals. but it's got so close and so embedded, you can just see those last fragments of it there. But I will talk about tree roots later. I was going to first give you the pirate, and I didn't know if you wanted him straight on or a little bit kind of the 3/4 view. What do you think?
I would go with the 3/4.
Okay.
And I'll take this opportunity to just introduce one more drawing technique, which I'll probably regret, but which is white on black. Now, there we go. So if you have black paper, it's quite an interesting exercise to work in light on black, because it's almost like you're working in reverse. So all that toning and shading that we were doing before with the dark background and leaving the paper light, you're kind of thinking in the opposite way then. And you can do this very simply with just white pencils, or you can get these. I've actually broken this one, but you can get nice white chalk pencils as well. So it's just like drawing with chalk, with something that you can sharpen.
I'm just stopping sharing a sec because I want to see what you do.
Okay. It's a shame this camera is so bad. So that's a Derwent color Chinese white, and the China white, and you get China black as well. They will draw on most surfaces, and you get a nice light color. But you can get a similar effect just with your ordinary white. Oh, I've broken another one. Ordinary white pencils. And I think this is another chalk one as well. Yes. So the chalky ones will have a bit more smudgeability, whereas your sort of white colouring pencil is slightly waxier. So you can see it's not quite as white. And actually, if I try and go over it, I can't go over it because it's waxy. So that's a good tip if you're working with these. Start with a chalk and use this one afterwards. But yes, so if if any participants have these to hand, and you can also get obviously white pens, like I don't have with me right now. But even things like this, which is a sort of Tipex correction pen, you can use things like that. But you can actually buy white gel pens, which are really nice to draw with and have a very nice flow. So,
I'll go back to sharing a screen so you can. Sorry about that. So there he is on the 3/4. I'll keep him up as the straight on view as well, just if anyone wants that choice.
That's nice. How do we know he's a pirate?
He's not a pirate. No, it's trying to resist giving them pet names, but that crack across that's not an in-life crack. That's something that's happened in the grave. But it just makes him look like he's wearing an eye patch. That and the very prominent gap in his teeth just screams pirate to me. So yes, I may try to remember him as 5723 to SJ, but no, he's a pirate. I'm sorry.
Where was he found?
So he's Cambridge City. So I don't know if. So there was a priory with a paupers hospital, and so in the graveyard you have priory people, monks. Do monks live in priories or anyway, some sort of religious order people, and farmers and people from rural Cambridge coming into town for being looked after at the hospital, or possibly being a tradesperson in town. I don't think his bones were given isotope analysis to find out. What would that do? So there are many isotopes. I'm going to have to do this from memory as well. There are many isotopes. They're called stable isotope analysis you can do. But for example, oxygen is normally oxygen 16, which means 8 neutrons, 8 protons. But you get oxygen 17, oxygen 18, which is a couple more neutrons.
And what does this tell us?
Well, so it's a bit heavier and so harder to incorporate into your diet, but oxygen in particular is kind of recycled through rainwater in a different way than it is through the ocean. So you get slightly different concentrations as to whether you're eating things from the sea or you're eating things from a river, which are again different from eating just plants. So as a general rule in Britain, if you have a higher oxygen 18 ratio to oxygen 16, it tends to mean you're eating fish. And the only people rich enough to eat fish are the religious orders, because they keep their own fish ponds.
Yes.
So most monkeries, priories, I'm losing words. most monk habitats are provided with a fish pond where they would be raising carp and trout to supplement their diet. Yes. And it changes the oxygen analysis isotopes in their bones and tells you if they are monks or not. And you can also compare, so your teeth are formed when you're a child. Most children aren't monks, therefore most children don't have a fish-rich diet. So you compare what's in the adult bones to what's in the teeth formed as a child to check that it changed, as opposed to you're living in a high isotope area or a diet that's full of isotopes all the time.
Well done. I'm very impressed.
Thank you. Whereas you can do similar things with carbon. Carbon-13 is preferentially taken up by most cereal crops, and carbon-14 is picked up by peas and beans and legumes, I think, as part of their nitrogen fixing process. So you can look at carbon-13 to carbon-14. And then there's things like strontium, which just help you figure out where in the country they are, and if they don't have a local amount of strontium in their childhood teeth, for example, then they've come from away.
Yes. So there is this thing about atomic explosions. So you can date things pre and post atomic explosions. Now, what's that called? By the amount of radioactivity you pick up.
That would make a lot of sense. I don't know what that's called, though.
There is a name for it, which I can't remember, only because I watch a lot of forensic programs, which I won't name. So if you get somebody out of a bog and they look like a bog mummy, but they happen to have a lot of these sort of radioactive isotopes, then they are post, the 40s when they first began nuclear testing.
That feels like it would be really handy. I mean, Lisa, you and I both work in museums a lot, and one of those fun discussions we had was, how would you commit a perfect murder? And in the museum I was working at the time, the general consensus was, well, you kill them, bury them, wait till they're just bones. Bones always have a risk of being dug up and then identified. So you dig them up, and then you take them to the museum. You put them in a box,
them in a cabinet,
and you say, urgently needs accessioning, needs attention of museum staff, at which point everyone will ignore it because it's a paperwork nightmare.
Yes. I'm not sure we've had exactly this discussion.
No, this was a discussion in a different context because they were doing building work. This was a discussion with a different person, different museum, but I thought I'd share this wisdom because
that's
came
always
up with
good to know.
But she came up with an even better thing because they'd been having building works. It's like, no, you're all wrong. Wrap him in roof lagging, label it asbestos. No one's touching that.
I mean, to be fair, I've been in a few museum stores, and they are quite organic places where the collections are built up over time. Yeah. And, for example, in my own museum, I work for Ipswich Museum. I was in one of the stores, and the conservator just happened to mention, have you seen the monk? And I'm like, no, I have not seen the monk. Where is the monk? Turned out the monk was in a lead-lined coffin under a pile of other stuff. including the plastic sealing thing, where you put specimens into plastic and seal it off. That was the only space that was big enough to put that thing. So you're lifting all these sort of machinery off, and there he was in a box. You could slip someone under there with him. No one would know for decades.
Well, so many museums have a box that's farmer brought this in. It's a skeleton, probably Roman.
Oh, I know. Probably Roman is one of the most common labels we have.
And pretty much every museum somewhere has put a query. It's like, do we have the farmer's name and is his wife living?
Yes. Oh, no, we don't have that information.
No. But I think any farmer just wandering in with a skeleton, probably Roman, it's like, maybe just run a Geiger counter over them and
yes. Check for their, missing relatives. Yes. I mean, we've got so many with beautiful hand, written labels found in a cider orchard. Probably Roman. There's no information about the people who actually find them.
Yes. And why are they always probably Roman? Why is every skeleton probably Roman? There was a lot of people live here.
There were a lot of other people. Yes, I know. How are we doing for time, Sue? I can't see my...
we are at 12:36, and I think we're running until 1 o'clock. So people have lots of drawing time, lots of time for questions, lots of time to stop me talking. Oh, shall I talk about tooth gaps? I'm going to talk about this chap.
Just before you start.
Yes.
Does he or does he not have a metopic suture?
He does indeed. It's another reason why I was immediately drawn to him. Him and I have that lovely...
and it looks like
suture.
That is just the suture. There's not one of those little floating islands at the top there.
No. So if I go, I'm just going to disturb everyone and go to that picture and zoom in on him because I have all that resolution. But no, you can see it. It's quite meandering. They don't usually meander quite like that without having more frilly bits. But you can start to see areas where the bone's under more stress by when it goes more frilly. So they always tend to go more frilly between the eyebrows because it's got to join in with these two nasal bones and the eye lacrimals and things here.
I did wonder that.
Yeah, this suture goes all the way back into there and comes up there and comes out there and comes down there because that's just how it all joins together. But look at those teeth and look at that bright white enamel he's got on them. So he's got
very shiny.
It is, and it would have been immensely kind of noticeable when he was alive. Let me zoom out for everyone to be able to draw him again. Sorry. I just love his teeth. So something I found out recently, you might just be born with teeth that are quite gappy. But if they are quite close together and then drift apart over time, that tends to be due to an overly tight frenulum.
Oh.
Now, a frenulum, if you don't know, there's a few frenulums in your body, but if you pull your front lip forward and stick your finger up from your front teeth upwards, there's a kind of strand that is more prominent than where the gum line is. That's the frenulum. There's another one under your tongue to help your tongue stay attached to the base of your mouth. Men have a frenulum holding their foreskin to their penis. And I am told that if you snap it, it will bleed for days until you get it stitched up. But moving back to the frenulum.
Good to know. Could you just change the main picture to the 3/4 view again? Sorry.
Oh, yes. Oh, sorry, I forgot I did that. Come on. Where's... Why are you being a beast? There we go. Sorry, yes, there.
Yes, so tell us more about the frenuli.
So if it is overly tight, it puts too much pressure on that part of the gum line, and your teeth are very mobile, organic. It's a very living thing. So if there's always a tightness in the middle, they start to pull apart and the teeth will move apart to make room for whatever is putting pressure there. and it's just a tendon. So
No, I didn't know that. That's amazing.
I only found that out recently because someone was going for corrective surgery and just basically having their frenulum sliced because their teeth were diverging.
Amazing.
But yeah, your teeth will constantly, because we're mammals, one of the things we have above all the reptiles, which includes the dinosaurs, is we have teeth that learn to mesh and try to find a partner to have a grinding surface against long term. So if, like me, you have a tooth removed and the one above it doesn't have any surface to grind against, it will grow out trying to find its partner to make a grinding. So I have a tooth that is going to crack itself because it's growing and growing and growing out, trying to find its partner, and the partner is just not there. Meanwhile, the gap where the tooth was has opened up much more as the other teeth have moved apart. But one's moved into the space where the wisdom teeth were, but because for millennia we have been not hunting by smell, our entire snout has been receding from kind of baboon shape back into a flatter face, and we started to cook our food, so we didn't need such strong muscles pulling on this jawbone, and so there's less need for a big jaw, and so our jaws have been getting smaller and smaller, and they just don't fit wisdom teeth in now. And
is that why we have to keep taking the damn things out?
Yes, that, and we don't rot them within 10 years to have like the first molars drop. Well, your first molar comes out about age 9 or 10. It's one of the first kind of adult teeth. The second molar, its first is like 7 or something. Second molar is like 14, 13. It's one of the last ones to come out. And then your wisdom teeth will come out at 18 or so. So basically, we evolved to give each set of molars about a 4-year life before they were ground down or rotted and gone. And so by the age of 22, you should have run out of molars because your wisdom teeth had been done in, and well, by then you should have been a parent, raised them, done your thing, and popped your clogs to the next world. And if not, then you're having soup, and you best be good at cooking. So
that's really interesting.
I really can talk about skulls a lot. This is terrifying. Now, I did notice there was a question way back in the chat. So Huda, I'm so sorry, I'm so bad at reading. Huda Halawachi said, thinking about skull paintings, I'm thinking as a linguist to work on a project in a way to capture the different messages hidden in the skulls. Which is a really fun concept because so much of this is so often just it's in an archaeological write-up, and you wouldn't know what else people could tell about you. She continues, you are referring right now to gender, age, maybe nationality of passed away people's skulls. How about this? I mean, I think that sounds superb.
That's really interesting.
Because I mean, Lisa, we both looked at skulls long enough now. As you say, you start to see the features and build a bond with them.
Yes.
So many people just
refer to them as, people like Roman Girl, the one that was found in a cider orchard. I did quite a lot of work with her and decided probably female.
Yeah.
And I ended up doing quite a number of different portraits of her. And they were portraits from different angles, different lighting, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But that's all I've got. How did she end up, in a box? Or, how did she end up in this cider orchard? Obviously, it wasn't a cider orchard at the time. Is she, in fact, even Roman?
Yeah.
And her skull is particularly beautiful. I found it, one side, there's a huge hole in that sort of temporal bone, the sliding one with plates. There's no mandible. What's the lower jaw called?
Mandible.
Yeah.
Maxilla.
Yeah. Mandible. Yeah. And I got very, very, very taken with her. In fact, I got so taken with her, and don't tell anyone at the museum, I took her home. without doing the appropriate paperwork. This is a long time ago, by the way. She's back now. I took her home for a week just so I could sit and draw her. You know, and yes, and that's something. There's so many skulls that have stories to tell.
Yeah.
If you're not a sort of forensic anthropologist, or even if you are, that's a different story.
Yes. It's like what happened to your body after death is a very different story to your life. And this is why I have a big box that I got from your Colchester Open Studios of stuff to take with me, so that whoever gets my skeleton also gets the box that says, well, this is my name, and here's a photo, and here's some of my favourite things, and here's a little music box to play It's a Wonderful World.
Really? A music box?
Yeah.
Oh, why not? Yes, because you do kind of want to tell that story, don't you? You want that story to continue.
But it's so sad when you know, like this lady here, a lot obviously happened in her life. She had a lot of illness. She had, I forgot to mention, her legs were not in proportion to her body, so they were a bit short. One was shorter than the other. She had, I mean, some of the reasons she has this childlike look is she probably had a bit of water on the brain that like made her skull more kind of childlike proportions. So all sorts of things were going on for her, and we know none of it. It's just gone. Yes. And I just wish you could give them more of a biography. And I wish I could go back and tell it, do you know what, you have the most beautiful articles I've ever seen, and I've seen a lot.
Well, that's definitely something to think about.
I think everyone should have a box of grave goods to take with them to tell their story. Really? And you get to tell whatever story you like. Of course, it doesn't have to be a real story either. You could just, you know, pop in your astronaut helmet and a moon rock.
And, you know, I've never thought about that. I mean, I've thought about what kind of tree I want to be buried under, but, you know, monkey puzzle, by the way.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, why?
I don't know. It's something... It's just one of my favourite trees. I have a list of trees that I like. I have a wish list. It's probably just as well you can't make Amazon lists of trees. So I got one for my wedding present, which was quite nice. A friend of mine gave me 50 quid, and I spent it on a Tilia Henriana, which is a type of lime tree with a particularly beautiful fringed leaf. And then I told my husband, obviously it was a gift to both of us, but that tree is mine. There's something, because they're monkey puzzles, you know, they're quite an ancient type of tree. I think it's an Oricaria. They're complex, they're spiky, they're hard to climb. You know, all the reasons. And also, you know, sometimes I feel quite being adept with your hands is because we are clever monkeys.
Yes.
You know, we've got these clever monkey fingers that we can draw with, or make things and hold things and manipulate things. Obviously, I can't quite do that with my feet, although I'm working on it. But yeah, you know, when it starts to get difficult to bend over, it's quite handy to be able to pick things up with your feet. I reason.
It's I hate winter because I have to wear like big slippers to keep my feet warm. But otherwise, it's like, oh, I've dropped something. Well, of course, I'd pick it up with my feet and then bend back.
You know, it's so there's lots of reasons.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. We've got 10 minutes left, and I did want to give people a few minutes on the last one.
Oh, yes.
Tree roots and stuff. So I'm going to stop sharing briefly and come and look at what people are. Oh, wow. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Could do more work, but yes. Really hard to light this.
Yes, but it does look just wonderful. There's a question of what are the holes under the eyes, and I realise I have to go back to sharing to point at them. Just a sec.
Ah, yes.
So these guys here, there are not many holes in your skull because it's a big protective case. But these guys here are a nutrient foramen?
Foramen, yes.
Yeah, or forama for a plural. So it's where nerves come through, blood vessels come through to be able to feed the front of your face, because all the vital supplies come up your throat and in behind all these facial bits. And so these peaky holes are just like where you push the
Is it the same for the ones in your chin? Because you quite often have them in your chin.
Yes.
And
yes.
sometimes people have them in their brow ridge.
Yes. Who do we? So there's one that's quite prominent. I was also looking for. I don't have Michael, do I? Sometimes you have a couple here in the back of your head.
Oh.
I mean, there's always a pathway. It's just whether you can see them or not. Quite often, there's a prominent one on one side, but not on both sides. And it's like, why are bodies so... I don't have any more
asymmetrical.
Head yeah, but we're so often asymmetrical, you can just about see a little one there. If I go to the 3D thing... Oh, I do have Michael. Here he is. He has some lovely ones. So that hole and that hole are his nutrient foramen that would come straight down the side. So the suture would come down here, but the suture's gone, but the holes are retained because they're essential.
Interesting.
But I think you can see the ones in the front here.
Yes, they're quite prominent.
Yeah, and if I switch to Bob, has really nice ones on her chin too. Oops. And here and here. So, and I've never quite learned where they are. They don't seem to consistently be anywhere, apart from they're in this bone, the maxilla bone. You can see the suture line there, which makes that officially the zygomatic. So they're always in the maxilla and in the mandible.
Yeah.
And there's a whole bunch of others. So if you look underneath the skull, there's about 10 exit holes. So there's a big one for the spinal column, and then I'm going to just try zooming in a sec. And then there's ones here. So that's the back of the nose and is a sinus. So I'm sorry, I'll do something really disgusting. If I go and then swallow, that's coming through those holes. I'm so sorry. I couldn't
good to know.
Illustrate it. But there's all these other ones, like here and here and here and here, and they're incredibly hard to see and they're incredibly hard to find, and they really are, I'd say, mobile, because you never know where you're going to find them on a skull.
So everyone has them, but they're not all necessarily in the same place.
Yeah. So it's
they're
usually
not always visible.
I don't know about that. I've not studied them systematically enough. It was hard enough finding them all on one. But the most of them are for the cranial nerves, for the facial nerves, and they're grouped marvelously. So you'll get, okay, I think that one's for facial nerve 3, 5, and 6. But It's only 5B because 5A, 5C, and 5D come out of this one or something. It's just, it's crazy and incredibly hard to learn and pretty much irrelevant because it doesn't seem to tell you about anything on the person. Someone's been trying to say it's an ancestry marker, but I remain
not convinced.
It's only one paper and they don't have any controls over it, so it's hard to know. And you might just be able to see again if I zoom in. There's a big hole in the back here, so there's a big set of holes for muscles and blood vessels, and then there's a little round thing for the nerve to go through, the optic nerve. But it's really hard to see. And then there's holes where your eye can weep into the top of your sinuses, and the hole here. So, if you eat chilies and your eyes water because of the fumes getting in them, tears will fall down the lacrimal duct here and out your nose and make your nose run too.
Oh, wow.
Sometimes if your eyelash goes in the back of your eye rather than falling out the front, it will come if you blow your nose, or sometimes you'll find you'll cough it out as it hits the back of your throat and it irritates you and you make it cough. And it's like, how have I eaten an eyelash? And it's your own eyelash.
That's amazing.
So there's a randomly awful thing. Right, we've got 5 minutes. I'm going to shift to Planty Skull. So,
and I'll quickly move to my final technique, which is, if you go full screen for a minute, I just want to show people these pens.
If I go full screen, no.
No, if
I stop sharing,
yes,
I should go, and I turn off my camera, I should hopefully vanish and make you full screen.
So what I've got here are Beryl Papermates. There's a fine and there's a broad. And I don't know what it is. They're just black pens. I don't know what it is about the inks that Beryl are using in these, but they dissolve in water beautifully. So, for example, you'll get a nice sort of, felt chippy line. But if you wet them, you get this wonderful bleed.
Wow.
And you can just see them sort of bleeding out there. And what will happen is the pigments in these inks will also change. So as they bleed out, you'll get blues and purples and all sorts of other colors. And you get a little bit of the original line staying. Depending on how wet you go, it can dissolve. And when it dries, of course, you can work back into it with the same pens. So this is just a lovely, lovely tool, very easy tool to use and carry around with you if you want to get that sort of grading and toning. It works better on a watercolor paper, but it does work on other papers too, as long as the paper isn't too absorbent. So, shall we go to our final skull?
Yes, I will go back to sharing. Sorry. There and there. So that's beautiful views of him. So I hate to be discriminatory. I don't like him face on much. He's not my type of skull.
No. Well, I can see that. I mean, because that side view is absolutely gorgeous.
Mm. Yeah, he's got such a lovely shape. He's got this
so flat on the top.
And I have seen bald men in the street, and I have followed them down the street because I'm just in love with the shape of the skull underneath. And I don't know if ever they turn around and say, "Why are you following me?" I don't know what I would say.
You have a great skull. To be fair, I remember I was in a conference or something once, and as you were saying before about being in a presentation or something, and then doing drawing. I was completely distracted by the head of the guy in front of me. And he had, I've forgotten what it's called, but the bone at the very back, the one at the back at the bottom that you can see, one.
Yeah.
It was bulgy.
Ah.
And there's a word for it. I can't remember what it is.
Occipital bun.
Occipital bun. Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah, that's the one.
Massive bump.
Yeah,
fantastic.
So if he has lots of ossicles, I'll try not to be distracted by what I'm doing on the right hand side as I go and find fun other bits. Let me not do that. But yes, if you get lots of extra bones in the back of the head, you often get that kind of distortion as they're all trying to like fit themselves in.
And I've got a feeling that someone told me that is also a genetic trait in some cultures.
Yes, if I try and import mesh.
And he had a shaved head as well, you see, so you could just see this massive lump. I know, it was fantastic. Poor man. I mean, luckily he never turned around, so he doesn't know. But that's a shame. I haven't tidied up my filing system, and it's a terrible mess. I was looking for the Neanderthal, but I don't have him to hand.
But they have a very prominent occipital bun, possibly because they have much bigger eyes and much better night vision than we did. Or possibly just that's the shape they like being. It's hard to know.
Yes.
But yes, I was looking for. Oh, I did this already. Don't do that. Don't do that. Stop doing that. So, can I get Mr. Polish up? So, you can make me open you are right. Right. No. So the picture on the right, let's, fine, I'll develop it. Right, that's what I have to do. Give it. So here's another chap with lots of ossicles. He's also one of these fen burials. So he's Iron Age / Roman. He is officially that old. He's officially from 300, 400 AD, and was buried in the fens. So he's got this. You can see how much of a nightmare it was to photograph because he's shiny everywhere because he's polished. But he's got all these ossicles.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was the first time I'd seen ossicles to this sort of extent. And again, you can see here the suture line's starting to obliterate, but there's so much complexity in this, it's just all retained. Now, if I get the file next to him, are you going to open where I was? No. Do not be distracted by the crazy things I'm doing over here with my filing.
Trying not to be.
I've got a side-on view of him because he's got all those ossicles. He's got that might be a better view. A huge bun.
Yes, that's the one.
Yes.
And is it something to do with muscle attachments, or is it just, as you say, the number of ossicles that sort of?
I'm not clear on it. See, that was when
look at that
my cat had made it onto my black velvet, and I was still learning how to do lighting. But you can see it's a massive bulge that just looks weird to be there. But
I mean, it is noticeably unusual. I mean, it's just,
I mean, he also has an enormous nose. I mean, even being generously coming down here, it's a big broken Roman nose. So he's doing well with his. He maybe really was Roman. But yeah, that huge bun, and again, don't be distracted by my craziness. No, you don't need that. It's just, sorry to cover your picture for a second. I'm gonna go find my Neanderthal. Skull. Why do I ever forget? So this is the one I've got a little 3D print of, Lisa.
Oh.
And yeah, he looks kind of normal until you get the right angle, and then you see it. When you hold it, it's really prominent. If you're used to handling skulls, I mean, he's got a massive jaw too. But this big bun at the back.
Bump is.
And they've got these so much bigger eyes than us. I think it's about 50% more kind of milliliters in their eyes.
Wow.
Which gave them much better night vision, much wider nose. So they've got a lot more sensory information coming in than we do. And this massive jaw for just nomming on stuff.
Yes.
But yeah, it's so much easier if I could just be handing around the models.
Yes.
So lovely.
Next time in real life.
Yes. I realised, sorry everyone, we've gone over time.
Oh,
I'm going to stop sharing then. I hope you, unless you need just one more minute, well, I'll just leave you one more minute with the picture. But I hope you've all enjoyed it. Thank you for the questions. I really can talk the hind legs off a donkey about skulls, it turns out. Next, hips.
very useful. So, does anyone want to share their drawings? Have people enjoyed the drawings as much as they've enjoyed the information about the skulls?
There's a lot of thanks coming up on the chat, which is lovely. But I think you can all come in and show us your pictures, or you can just be shy.
So I'm just going to switch back to front cam.
Yeah. I'm going to.
Oh, I can see the chat now.
Yeah, and I'm going to stop sharing to stop doing that awful Inception thing.
Yeah.
Hello, Catherine.
So, I'm being brave.
That's really kind of you. Thank you.
I did so. It was really fun. Thank you.
Oh, lovely.
Oh, lovely.
Really beautiful. And great shading. Do you do a lot of drawing?
Yeah. I do a lot of drawing of skulls as well.
Oh. You get a feel for bone, right?
Yeah.
There is something about it.
My little friend.
Oh, is that a ram?
I don't know. I found it in a field.
Oh,
that's
lovely.
Amazing.
Oh, gorgeous.
Lovely. I have envy now. I have quite a wide natural history collection of skulls, but they tend to be things I've found. So, yeah, I haven't found one of those.
Oh.
But a friend of mine has got a red deer head in her freezer.
Oh. See, I still live at home, so I think if I did that, my mum would murder me.
Yeah, I'm quite lucky. As Sue knows, I've got a studio that's a little bit in the countryside, and I have a body farm. It's always handy.
I've just been building the box to store the badger skull and the squirrel skull you gave me from your body farm. So thank you.
Did I give you a squirrel?
Myself.
Oh, no, it was a rabbit. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay, I was going to say, I think I've only got one squirrel. I'd have kept that.
I'm going to turn myself off again.
No problem.
Thank you so much for sharing, Catherine.
And I just saw Anne-Marie say she's a craniosacral therapist.
Wow.
And I did a picture for a craniosacral therapist of the sacrum.
And what is
all the angles? Oh, I need to share my screen again.
What is a craniosacral therapy?
So it's kind of the right. It's the very middle of the skull. So this bit here is where the eyes sit. Here's where the nose fits in. Here's where things like the ethmoid fit in. And then the zygomatic arch will come around here. So that's sort of face on, I think.
What's the name of that bone? It looks like a bit like a butterfly, doesn't it?
Yes, I keep saying sacrum. Is that right?
No, it's
not.
Oh, it's gone.
Yep, same here.
Yeah.
Oh man. Yeah, I mean, you never see it. Sagittal bone. Oh.
We're both suffering from the brain fog, aren't we? Damn it.
And I don't have any exploded skulls, so I'm not used to looking at exploded skulls.
No, well, it's one that you can't see. You can't see from the outside or the inside because it's hidden in.
Which is why I thought I could share that. And and that's an occipital. And Anne-Marie, if you want to take a screen grab, do feel free if it helps.
Yes, and do feel free to tell us what the damn thing's called.
Yes. Oh, I can't believe I forgot. I'm getting out of screen sharing. No, I have already. Hey, now I'm back. Sphenoid. Oh, thank you.
Yes. Oh, saved.
Thank you so much. Oh, no, I'm fine with zygomatics. I'm pretty good with your ethmoids, but sphenoid, all the S's,
Yes.
I go to,
Yeah, you have to
scapulus
go
and
through
all
them one at a time.
Mm.
Well, it's been, from my point of view, it's been really lovely. It's been lovely to see your collection, and it's actually been really therapeutic just to sit and and just sit and do some drawing without any particular purpose except for the fun of it, and to have this variety of skulls to look at too. Thank you.
Well, thank you also. I haven't seen your drawings at all yet, though. Could you hold them up to the camera?
Not me.
Yeah.
There's the
lovely
fluidy one.
Yeah.
But obviously didn't do much work on that. Had a quick one of squiggly sutures. My favourite actually is this one, the biro.
Oh yeah.
That's ended up being probably the most sort of complete and most subtle in textures. And of course the first one is just the front on pencil.
Yeah, where
I'm definitely going to back to your. Yes, I did. I'm going to go back to your web page, and look out.
It's just chock full of skulls.
I know. Well, I always had this thing about not working from. Oh, and there's the black and white one. Not working from photos. I'll definitely do some more work on this one, because when you're drawing from an object that's in front of you, you pick up a whole load more information than you do drawing from a sort of flat. Yes, and even with our peripheral vision, even if you're looking at something full on, you get, you see it slightly differently, and what you decide to draw are the things that you find interesting. Whereas with a photograph, what you get is you get everything, and it's all equally interesting.
Yeah, so no priorities to it. Yeah.
Yes, it's a different thing. But I have to say, since lockdown, when so much more stuff has been going online, I've been doing other people's drawing classes, and I've been teaching drawing classes as well. And of necessity, we've been working from digital images. Yeah. And actually, from the point of view of my OCD, that's been amazing, because they don't move, the light doesn't change, it's just, you can just keep going and going and going with the detail. It's a different experience, but it's definitely a worthwhile one.
Excellent.
Yes. Well, thank you.
Well, we've gone way over time, but at least
it's not that much.
Such a
Only
pleasure.
10 minutes. Okay. And thank you everyone who joined in wherever you are.
We didn't even do the where you're coming from. Oh,
I know. No, it's been brilliant. Shall we sign out now so people can go to other?
Let's do that.
Other things.
What a lovely session I've had. I've really enjoyed it, though my throat is a bit dry.
It's just been brilliant getting all that information. That's all in your clever head, your clever masculine head,
which will all be lost. So we've got it. Yeah. Right. I'm going to say goodbye and sign off. Goodbye.
Bye.